Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Reef Tank Automation video series. In this part I'm going to go over my manifold system. I'm going to go over some of my plumbing and how I do all of my dosing and some of my filtration that I use for my reef tank. We're going to go over a couple other small items on the Apex system. So let's get started. The first thing you'll notice on my main RO and R auto water change system is that I have two FMMs. My two FMMs have high-low sensors for my reservoirs. They also have my leak sensors as well. I plug them all into my FMMs here. I then have a liter meter, and currently the liter meter is programmed for my reef tank and programmed for my 300-gallon fish-only tank. So what's nice about these is they have the built-in pump heads here at the front, and you can drive or take water from either one of these reservoirs. Right now, I'm taking them from the salt water, and then send them to wherever we need to send them. And they send them pretty far. I have my 300 roughly about 70 feet away from where we're standing, and I can send this all the way to my 300. The other one sends new fresh water to my reef tank. On the back side of these, you can plug in two remote pumps. So I have a remote pump that's sitting behind my 300-gallon tank, and I have a remote pump that is sitting behind my nano tank. And those remote pumps pull or push water, depending on which way you want to go, back to this location, or in the case of the 300, it pushes it to a drain that's behind the 300. My reef tank, however, pushes the remote pump back to my reef tank. So that's how I'm able to do an automatic water change with the nano system. The liter meters are very easy to program. They have a rate, they have a flow, and they have 3 different pumps. It's possible I might do a video on how to set up the liter meters, but that's basically how they work. So if we come over here, this is the back side of my fish tank, which as you've seen in other videos, that goes into my wall. This is the shared wall with my kitchen. I have a Trident, of course, sitting over here. My Trident feed line actually comes up here, and I have it going into the overflow. This is a 100 INT, so all I did was just feed it right into the back of the overflow, where it gets very minimal dirt, grime, pebbles. Works out very well. I did the same thing for my reef bot. So my reef bot input is right here. Now I've covered my overflow here so that I don't have algae growth inside the overflow system. And then you'll see over here, I have my auto feeder, and then I also have my cleaner, which will go through in the front end of the tank, which allows me to get to this panel right here, comes off, and then I'm able to just get to my cleaner, which I have mounted right over there. I'll scroll up a little bit up my lights. I have a T5 hybrid system. So those are two Ecotech XR 30s, with diffusers. Those are generation 4. And then I have the T5 doing the rest. You'll see that I have a nice little shelf right above it that I had built for me to store all kinds of stuff. The lights themselves are actually hanging from hooks, and then I have a wooden shelf right pretty much surrounding the lights. So that's the top of the tank, and that's how I get the Trident information. Now the Trident also has its drain, which we're going to go over. The drain comes back through the cabinetry, comes all the way around, and comes into my 2 drains that I made here. If you look real closely, you'll see I have 2 drains that I made. The drain, one of them is for the reef bot and the Trident, which I have a little T there, or that's, I guess, a Y. And then I also have another drain, which is for draining anything from my reef tank, so I could pull water out of it. That's how I'm able to drain my Trident and my reef bot without having to have a container. So let's go through kind of what's underneath here. So as you can see, every time I open my door, I have a light that comes on. I'm using a SmartThings sensor right here. I also have a button in case I just want to turn it off and on right here. I can just turn it off and on right here. So starting with my return side, you will see I have a high, a low, and a medium sensor. The medium sensor is where I keep my auto top off. The high is just a sensor to tell me it's too high, and the low is just to tell me it's too low. I use a Vectra L1. There's all my dosing sections. So I dose trace elements, I dose phyto, I dose aminos, and then my blue line is my RO water, and the red line is salt water. You'll notice that there is a Y going for my salt water. The reason I have a Y is because one of them comes from the saltwater reservoir, which I just mentioned, and the other one comes from my nano. So I'm able to pull and push water from my nano into this tank so I don't have to mess with the nano. I have a NIOS 160 skimmer. I also have a recirculating CO2 scrubber for it with a cleaner. I also am dosing ozone, which I'll show you in a moment, and that's what the black line is. So I have a T here, one coming from the recirc, one coming from the ozone. This is a little small reactor for anything that I want to use it for, and it comes off of my manifold right here. See that? The output of my manifold right here goes to a black line which goes into my chiller. It then comes out of the chiller back up to a line here which is hard plumbed, as you can see, and this is my return right here, and then I have a flow sensor right here so I know where the flow is for that. I used to have a scrubber which I took out, and that's what I used to hook up to that flow sensor and the top right there. I now use a refugium. So there's my main drain right here. Main drain goes into the roller mat right here. My left side goes into my calcium reactor, which is right here. The calcium reactor requires a feed pump, or in this case a manifold feed, which then feeds into a bubble trap, which is what this is, to make sure there's no bubbles coming into it. And then this is the ACR calcium reactor. You will see that it has two boxes. The top box is the control box, and the bottom box is what does all the work. And then of course I have my CO2 going into that. You will see at the top here I also have another peristaltic pump right here. That is the pump that takes water out of my salt water, or I'm sorry, out of my sump, and drives it to the nano. So that's sitting right there. I have an extra FMM here, and I also have an 8-bar here for a multitude of different things, mainly my skimmer, my return pump. It all gets plugged into the EV8 here. So you see I have some power back there, and then all my wires are nice and neat up top. Everything is up high. I also have a Skimmer Collection, which you will see comes from my skimmer. And then of course I have a refugium. So I'm using these, they're Santa Monica Gems is what they're called, and they are powering my refugium. I also have a heater sitting right there in case it ever needs to turn on, which here in Arizona it generally never turns on, but it's there as a safety measure. So that's pretty much my reef tank setup here. Next I'm going to go over dosing and what else I'm doing on the right side of things. But stay tuned for part 3. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions about anything, you can always comment below. Please make sure that you like and subscribe to my channel. If you are a subscriber, make sure you hit that bell so you're notified when I do other videos. I typically do live streams every Saturday morning, and I give away things during that time, so if you make sure you hit the bell, you will get notified when I do that. Thank you again for watching, and stay tuned for part 3.